The Package is another underrated episode, and one I would say a little more on my personal favorites. I wouldn't say it's one of my top favorites. It's just one that stands out to me that I enjoy watching. Again, not one of my top favorites, but I would say one that's like I like, and if I was just like not binge watching, but just like just like skiing through it. Oh, with this. Oh, I want to watch this one again. The Package would definitely be one of them. I just think that the 1 hour photo lab storyline with George and the woman, and then of course the guy who gets turned on by George's photos, is quite hilarious. That's my favorite story, and of course Jerry suing the post office, and Newman, of course, being the one in charge of investigating his case, is quite hilarious, I would say. So this one definitely is one I would rank up there as one of my personal favorites. Not my top favorites, but one that I would enjoy. So there was a couple different stories going on in this episode. First off, of course, Elaine had this rash that she was trying to get treated and see what's going on with it. But while she was waiting for the doctor, she took a peek at her chart and saw back in 1992, they marked her down as a difficult patient, which drove her nuts. And instead of keeping her mouth shut about it, she then, of course, mentioned something to the doctor right before the doctor was telling her about her rash. And she mentioned how, I guess, she was asked to wear a gown, but she had purposely wore a tank top because she was questioning a mole she had. And of course the doctor said, well, if it's bothering too much, maybe I'll just erase it. And he goes to erase it, and she goes, but it was in pen. You fake erased it. But the doctor just goes, well, that rash is going to be fine, basically. And just kind of brushes her off, but she starts writing her chart again. And Elaine's just like terrified what the doctor's going to say this time. So then, meanwhile, George went to the 1 hour photo lab to pick up some pictures he had recently taken. And he's definitely interested in the woman there named Sheila, in this episode she was Photo Lab Sheila. And she notices she says, by the way, I hope you got that mustard stain off your shirt, referring to one of the stains in his photos. So George obviously thinks that she's coming on to him, which we find out she was definitely into him. And of course, he's now trying to figure out, what the next move to make is. Well, then, of course, he pulls out the photos and finds this woman in a lingerie photo, and he thinks that Sheila put that in there to kind of make a jab at him. So George was going to just jump on the train, run back down there, and ask her out. But then Kramer's like, oh, no, don't do that. He goes, you gotta play the game a little bit here. A little back and forthness. He says, wow, you sent an enticing photo of you to her. George is like, I don't know. But then Kramer says, well, I happen to be a pretty decent photographer. Of course, later in a cab ride with George and Elaine, George was asking Elaine how Kramer was as a photo, of course, other than as a photographer, because Kramer took her Christmas card photo, which of course was the photo where her nipple was exposed. But of course, minus that, Elaine said he was great. She said she even cropped out the photo and used it as one of her ID cards, I think it is. So George considered it, and he actually went along with it. And of course, Kramer blasted the music as they're taking those photos. Like, come on, George, get real. George took his shirt off. He's poses whatnot. And of course, there's a scene where Jerry's walking down the hall. Here's movie. He goes, I don't even want to ask, which we've seen, of course, several times, moments like that where George hears something's going on in Kramer's apartment. He's like, I ain't asking. And he just keeps going. Meanwhile, though, Kramer notices that Jerry's stereo is broken. And they say you're going to get a new one, get it fixed. He goes, nah, he says the warranty on it expired 2 years ago, so he can't get a refund on it. And then Kramer goes, well, do you want a refund? Leave it to me. So then Jerry thinks Kramer's going to, take it to someone he knows and get a refund for it, right? Well, then a mysterious package shows up in the mail. There's no return address on it. Jerry refused it, though, because he was suspicious. Uncle Leo happened to be walking by and knew the postman who was trying to give Jerry the package. So since Jerry didn't take it, Uncle Leo did. And then Uncle Leo then called Jerry, of course, starts talking about Cousin Jeffrey again, which apparently this was the last time Cousin Jeffrey was mentioned. That's another character we never saw, besides Bob Sacamano. We never saw Cousin Jeffrey either, I believe. As far as I can remember. But then Uncle Leo opened the package, and you hear this explosion. I guess there was something with the stove or something like that next door that exploded and basically just burned off his eyebrows. But the package was broken stereo parts. Jerry didn't know this, but Kramer put Jerry's stereo in a package and broke up the pieces to basically say that, and he bought insurance, I think, on it or something like that, to basically say that the stereo broke while in shipping with the United States Postal Service. So his idea was sue the post office and basically they would pay for a whole new stereo for him. Well, of course, guess who got put on the case? Newman was put on the case. There was this scene where Jerry, of course, was being investigated for mail fraud because Newman is suspicious of them. And, of course, there's a scene where Jerry's interrogating Jerry, but yet Newman's underneath a hot light, which apparently is a parody. It's a parody from Basic Instinct, which Wayne Knight, who plays Newman, appeared in that film. It's basically a parody of that. Of course, he's sweating, and Jerry has this drink in his hand, but he wouldn't let Newman take a drink at all from him, even though Newman asked for it. Meanwhile, Elaine starts doctor hopping because she didn't realize that if you go to a different doctor, they get your chart, and basically they're just all brushing her off because they're seeing her chart. And of course, Elaine says something, and then even once a time she tried to steal her chart, take out what she didn't like, but of course the doctor stopped the elevator and opened back up, took the chart, takes the pen, starts writing it again. Easily, for those of you who are wrestling fans, I remember back in 2016 when Chris Jericho was on Raw and he brought the list of Jericho. You know what happens, Elaine Bennis? Whenever you try to manipulate your chart, you just made the list! Well, not made the list, but they basically just pull out her chart and start writing, more negative stuff about her. So she's trying to find some doctor who would take care of her, but all of them are just brushing her away because her chart says she's difficult. She even randomly got a call from the American Medical something, I can't remember what it was, and confirmed her last name. And of course they got mad because she wouldn't hang up the phone after that. But basically she got banned from going to every single doctor in the world. So what happened when Uncle Leo went to go see his doctor to get checked because of his eyebrows? Elaine tries to go there and pose as his nurse so that she can find out, basically, without unknowingly the doctor, find out how to treat her rash, because no other doctor will treat it, and the rash is getting worse. Well, then the doctor, of course, stepped out and was on the phone, and then Elaine's freaked out, oh my goodness, they're catching on to us. So Uncle Lou's like, what about my eyebrows? And Elaine draws these like black lines with his eyebrows. Then when the doctor came in, he just saw because of the way the eyebrows were drawn, that Uncle Leo was being difficult. And then Elaine tried to send in Kramer to pose as a doctor for him to get her chart, and for basically so that way they can fix the chart and Elaine can finally get that rash taken care of. Well, that didn't work out because Kramer was because Kramer didn't have any way of showing that he was a real doctor and what clinic he was from. So then he's got a chart on him now. So he's got a black mark on him. So Elaine, Uncle Leo, and Kramer all got black marks. The episode actually ended with them at some doctor in the middle of nowhere, and they're about to be taken back to get their work done until they get a call, and basically they're doomed there as well. So don't know what happened with that rash, but I guess Elaine's not allowed to be checked out by a doctor anymore because she's difficult. But back, of course, to George and Jerry's stories. So then, after the seductive photos were taken, George takes them back to Photo Lab Sheila, and he gives them to her, hoping that she'd be the one to develop them. Well, as he leaves, Sheila asks this guy who was there, Ron, saying, "Hey, Ron, I'm going to lunch. Can you do a roll?" "Yeah, sure, no problem." And she goes, "By the way, that one model was here. She misplaced one of her lingerie photos. Have you seen it?" He's like, "No." So it shows that Sheila didn't give the photo. So that creates doubt that maybe Sheila's really not into him, but also she was not going to be seeing the seductive photos of George. Meanwhile, back at the interrogation, things go opposite because they find that Jerry didn't sign for the package. So things were working in Jerry's favor at first, because Uncle Leo signed for the package, not Jerry. So they said, we'll contact you upon further investigations in this case. So basically it looked like Jerry was about to win. But of course, Newman, who was walking down the street, goes, "Jerry, Jerry, Jerry." He couldn't say that he lost to Jerry. Until he walked past the 1 hour photo lab. And he saw that Ron was working on the photos, and he happened to see this one photo that George had taken of Jerry looking at while Jerry had his screwdriver right by the stereo. And he sees that, and basically that's his ticket of saying, "Oh, Jerry, you're producing mail fraud here," to bust him. And of course, in a deleted scene, he did walk in and say, "I'm part of the Postal Service. We're investigating something. I need to see those photos. They're part of my evidence." And of course, in the deleted scene, when they took away, the one guy says to Ron, "Was that a badge?" And he goes, "I think it was just stamps," or something like that. So he took the photos away. George comes back for the photos. Sheila was at lunch when Newman stopped by. And she said, "I'm sorry for some of your photos went missing, but I'll call you when we find them." And then George basically uses that to ask her on a date, which she says yes. So when he says he walks away, when he goes to leave, Ron just came back. He like, hello. He was a little too happy there. Obviously, he got a little turned on by George's photos there, and George's a little freaked out. He's like, "Hello," and walks away. So then Sheila tells Ron, "So the little guy finally asked me out." He says, "But we can't find his photos." He goes, "Oh, some guy from the Postal Service came by and had to confiscate them. He left his card." And of course, a card just said Newman on them. Damn, we couldn't figure out Newman's full name. But then Newman calls Jerry back, and then he calls George also. Why George? We'll find out here. So Newman shows Jerry the photograph he found at the photo lab of Jerry with the screwdriver by his stereo. And basically that shows evidence that Jerry in fact did have his stereo was fully intact before Kramer put it into the mail, which of course Newman didn't know that. So basically, they failed at getting Jerry that refund and getting the money for a new stereo. Kramer's plan failed, and Jerry had to pay a small fine. So he's like, "We're done here," and then of course Newman's like, "Not so fast." And then he basically just wanted to, just rat out George and embarrass him. And then he has like a full-size printout of George's photo. And then Jerry's like, "Oh my God." And then he pulls out another photo. Ron, the guy from the photo lab, got a little too excited from it and decided to post tune for it. And sneaked that into George's photo packet. And then George was like, "Oh my god!" And then Newman's like, "Can you explain yourself?" And Jerry's like, "I like to ask you a few questions too." And of course, Sheila shows up because she got in Newman's car and is trying to figure out what happened to George's photos. Then she sees the full printouts of George and Ron, and she's like, "Oh my god, George!" And she walks away, completely turned off. And George chases after her. He's like, "No, Sheila! There's a complete misunderstanding here." And Jerry says some type of line about the art of seductivity or whatnot it was, and basically, George was doomed. Oh, man. He wasn't even involved in this whole thing, but yet Newman just had to embarrass George for the heck of it just because it's Newman. He's pure evil. Ah, goodness gracious. But that's the package. Again, underrated episode for sure. I think it's pretty funny, especially that whenever George sees Ron, he's like, "Oh." Obviously, he got a little turned on by those photos, because if he wasn't turned on, he wouldn't have put that. He wouldn't have thrown out that's not a photo of him, and he'd be like. I do like how, like, you know, the music was playing, and George was like just like posing style and whatnot. But not too much trivia, really, for this episode. Or like I said, the scene which Newman is interrogating Jerry about mail fraud is a parody of Basic Instinct, which Wayne Knight did play in that film. Again, this episode contained the final mention of Jerry's unseen cousin Jeffrey. Of course, there was a scene also in this with the whole thing with the whole, you know, Kramer said how they're trying to have a plan to sue the post office and get the money for Jerry's stereo. Said they'll treat it as a write-off. That scene was used in a 2012 New York Times interview, and they had a bit of a dialogue in it. Of course, this was also one of 3 times that Kramer used his alias Dr. Von Nostrand when he was trying to get Elaine's chart. The first one was back in The Nose Job in 1991 in season 3, and then in season 9 in The Slicer he does appear there again, where he's trying to help George get another photo of his boss in that season topless to replace a photo that he tried to airbrush him out of, but we'll get into that one later. But yeah, that's basically it. Not too many trivia for this round, and that's actually it for disc 1 of season 8. There's only 5 episodes on that disc. There's only 22 episodes in season 8. The previous several we've done had 24, so slight bit shorter season, but just by 2 episodes, but not bad. So guys, with that being said, see you guys in disc 2. Getting to some more Seinfeld, and again, we are getting closer to the end. We have 3 discs left in season 3, and the 3 discs left in season 8. I'm sorry, we're way past season 3, and then of course we have season 9 as well. So we are almost there. We're almost done with this review series. So guys, once again, what were your thoughts on the package episode? Have you ever tried to pull off what Jerry and Kramer did with the stereo? Have you also tried to, impress the woman in the photo lab? Can't say I've tried impressing women in other places before, but that's my past. I'm a happy, engaged man now. So yeah. So what are your guys' thoughts on this episode? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. Follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAirboy93. And until then, guys, I will catch you all later. Have a great rest of your night. Peace out, everybody.